Greetings and welcome to the Progressive Christians podcast. We are the love your neighbor kind of Christians and not the storm the Capitol kind. So if you're curious about what a socially and politically progressive Christianity looks like, then this is a podcast for you. My name is Reverend Dr. Christopher Carter and I am your host. I am a professor of theology at Methodist Theological School in Ohio, and I'm the lead pastor of the Loft Faith Community at Westwood United Methodist Church in Los Angeles, California. We're going to invite you to please rate and review and all that good stuff for our show. Please do other stuff on Spotify and iTunes. And if you are unaware, we are also on YouTube, so you can watch us and see our beautiful faces, if you will, on YouTube. Please like and subscribe to us on that platform. I am joined by the full crew today, Julia, Wesley, and Reverend Blair. How are y'all doing today?
Hi.
Hello. When do we get to call ourselves YouTubers? Not that I want that. I'm just wondering. Is there what's the metric?
What's the threshold? Ooh, man,
Yeah.
I don't know. I don't know. I don't know.
I don't know that we're not there yet.
We're not there yet.
think, do we have to attend like one of the vlogging conferences? I think if we're big enough to attend a vlogging conference, then we
or
would
at least be
YouTubers.
invited.
Perfect.
Even if we don't attend.
Yeah.
Perfect.
But we're glad to be on YouTube because we're getting good engagement.
Absolutely.
We are getting really good engagement.
Yeah, we are. Some of it, I mean, it's engagement, and
But I like that.
All press
I
is
like
good
that.
press.
If someone's not hating, you're not doing something right.
Yeah. We had one person respond to a hater, that's what I want. I want self-policing. I want somebody to
Fighting in
respond
the
to the haters.
comments.
Exactly.
Get in there.
That's what I want. That just makes my life a little bit easier.
Today, before we recorded, we had our first in-person shout out or our first in-person comment from a listener. My friend Hawk Hawkins is visiting and jumped on the pod to say hello to everyone and shared that this is their church right now because they have not found a space of safety. We're a former clergy person out of the church now, but is a solid listener every Friday. So thanks, Hawk. And those of you who are jumping in and letting us be your spiritual community, we're honored to do that.
Yeah, very honored. So I'm really delighted to be joined by honestly one of my really good clergy friends. And so I'm so excited to have Lydia Sohn on the podcast with us. Lydia is here to talk about her book, Here, A Spirituality of Staying in a Culture of Leaving. And so I'm going to read Lydia's bio, then just have her share a little bit about herself. So Lydia is a mom, a writer, and United Methodist pastor, currently serving at Walnut United Methodist Church. Her writing has appeared in the New York Times, The Atlantic, and the Christian Century, among others. One of her very first essays, What Do 90-Somethings Regret Most?, received over 700,000 views, leading it to be one of the top 10 most read essays on Medium. As a daughter of immigrants who moved to America in search of an American dream and achieved it, she saw with her own eyes that all can be burned down to begin afresh at any time. But it wasn't until her adult years, after multiple moves and a life of chasing greener pastures, that she began to realize the power of stability and commitment and our miraculous abilities to transform our circumstances from inside out. She currently lives in Claremont, California, with her husband and 3 children. Lydia, welcome to the podcast.
Hi, all. I am so excited to be with you guys. Thank you for inviting me.
Oh, no, we're so excited to have you here. Lydia and I've known Lydia, oh God, I think I was just in my PhD, maybe finished my coursework. So it's been well over a decade.
Yeah.
And I remember in our first conversation, I was your TA
yeah.
in a class. But just our conversations, even at that point, you always came across as such a very curious person and a person who was very, very intelligent and who always had thoughtful things to say. And so I was really excited when I found out you're writing this and excited to read it, excited to participate in the publicity around it and engage it. And like I said, grateful to have you on this podcast joining us.
Thank you guys.
Again, yeah, well, I guess maybe a way to start it off, just kind of kick things off, is maybe share a little bit about if there's anything that I didn't share in the bio that you think is important to share, feel free to share that. But more than anything, I'm really curious as to what compelled you to write this book.
Yeah. Well, you said it. a lot of it was a good intro to what the book is about. So I'm an immigrant, a Korean American immigrant. My parents immigrated to the United States when I was 3 years old, and my brother was 1, in search of the American dream. And in Korea, the social strata is a lot more rigid than it is in America. And of course, we all have criticisms of the socioeconomic mobility, in America as well. But compared to Korea, I mean, it is like a completely different world. They were dirt poor, and a classic Korean American immigrant story, immigrated in the 1980s in search of bigger dreams. And they got it. They got it. And so I was told from a young age that I could be anything and do anything that I want, even if it meant leaving behind communities, jobs, what I thought I wanted to be, if I thought of something new. And it wasn't until my older years that I came across a unique type of spirituality called the Benedictine spirituality of stability, and the value of staying and stability and alchemy and transforming things from the inside out, rather than just going to a new place when things got boring or hard. That set me on a completely different way of life than the one that I had been taught growing up by my immigrant parents. And of course, the American ideal of onward and upward and pursue all the dreams that you want to. And that is how the book was born. The idea for the book was born.
No, that's amazing. And I think it really ties into, like, again, your personal experience in the ways in which, in some sense, there, as you described, I want to say a tension, or maybe it is helpful to say a tension between an immigrant identity and the rootedness you're talking about in the book. But I know Julia and Blair, y'all had a question that kind of came up in light of the kind of wrestling with what it means to take that seriously, the immigrant identity, in light of this book. Blair, did you want to go and ask that question?
Yeah, I'll jump in. I actually think it's interesting because it aligns too with another question I know we had about itinerancy. So
yeah, so different.
So in the United Methodist Church, we are what's called itinerant if you are an ordained elder, which Christopher, Lydia, and I all are, which means we don't necessarily choose where we live. The bishop and a group of people, we hope, using the discernment of the Holy Spirit, decide where we go and when, which means like we are always kind of spiritual migrants. And Lydia, you're a literal immigrant, right? Like your family made a huge leap to come to a brand new place where they didn't speak the language that you were used to speaking. And so how does that, knowing that you've committed to this itinerant system, that you have these roots of moving where you needed to move, and I was touched especially by the way you told the story in the introduction of the book of just constantly being on the move. And some of that's related to like socioeconomic realities of like when you don't have financial ability to be stable, there's just this tension that's in the book of this identity of itinerant pastor, of immigrant, and that all of that motion, and yet the desire is to stay, like this goal, you're trying to develop this kind of different mindset. So I'm curious, how do you understand sort of all of those things integrating as you're exploring this question of stability, when in your roots, in your bones, is this call to move?
So I think that the Methodist Church is coming to realize the outdated nature of the itinerant system. It derives from the early American history of single men, going from town to town, probably, with the understanding that if they had wives, and the wives would stay home with their children. And it's just a totally different reality now, right? We're not living in frontier America. where new towns and new cities are being built as we move westward. We have settled communities, and we have tons of female pastors. I think actually we have more female pastors now in the United Methodist Church. Is that right? Okay, I remembered hearing that. And a lot of us have children. And so I think too, modern day research is bearing out the reality that churches thrive when their pastors stay. So I see our cabinet kind of realizing the different culture and trying to shift that itinerant nature into a more practical one for our day and age and context. And I really appreciate that. So anytime I get a call from our cabinet, they're always like, what's your family situation? What do you think is best for the church? And all that stuff. And I love that they're asking those questions instead of on annual conference day, which actually happened like 30 years ago. We show up and they're like, all right, Lydia, you're going to Hawaii. So pack up tomorrow because you're going to get on the boat to Hawaii, Yeah, go ahead, Wesley.
That's wild.
Yeah,
You'd
isn't
show
it
up to
wild?
a conference, and then that's where you're told you're moving. You're uprooting yourself.
At the end of the conference. Yeah,
Yes.
they'd read the rolls. And then I've been told that there'd be a line at the payphones so that the men who just found out their new appointment could call their wives and tell them where they were moving next week.
Yeah.
Start packing, honey. We're
exactly.
moving across the country.
Yeah. But it was understandable, right? Because the start packing, honey, was usually the husband to the wife, because females were not allowed to be ordained at this time. It was probably a one career household. So they can do stuff like that, right? In a way that's not really practical or life-giving to us and our families today. So at the same time, we are itinerant. And I talk about this in the book, where I was very happy and deeply settled in Arcadia as the assistant pastor. And I got a phone call to take up a bigger appointment at a bigger church as a senior pastor in San Diego. And it was supposed to come as like this compliment. And I just wanted to die. Like, I was like, I don't want to do this. Like, my entire body was like resisting this move. And that was actually another really important part of my story of like figuring out what that meant. Like, is this something I need to listen to? Like, what kind of journey is my body wanting to go on when it's resisting this itinerant system? And I remember sharing this on Facebook, like, I don't really want to do this, and I'm an immigrant, and I just want to be home, and what kind of home is it if I'm moving every 3 years? And a retired United Methodist pastor, who was also a good friend of mine, the Reverend Sharon Rhodes Wickett.
Oh,
our very own.
Yeah, shout out. No, Sharon is amazing.
We all
Sharon
know
is amazing.
her. We all love her and
She's
her
so
family.
great, right? And she's like totally itinerant from that era where they did move every 5 to 7 years. And she moved all over the West Coast. And she's also a mom of 2 kids. And she sent me an email, like, commiserating and sympathizing with me. And she said, remember that ultimately your rootedness is in God. So I am very much a follower of Wendell Berry, loving our land, knowing our land, giving back to the land, giving back to our community, and digging deep right where we are. And that's a part of my story. That's a part of my book. But I don't want us to stop there. We got to dig deeper and root ourselves in God. Because as much as I want to stay in Claremont for the rest of my life, I am very, very open to the fact that I might be called elsewhere, and that I will be okay, and my kids will be okay, and we're going to just settle in a new territory and give back to that land.
And I would guess you learned that from your parents, right? Who took this big leap.
Yeah.
Who took this big leap across an ocean.
Yeah.
Maybe can you say a little bit more? Because you talk about your parents quite a bit in the book too, and I'm wondering if you could share a little bit about how did they teach you that, whether implicitly or explicitly?
Well, I think that they in one sense, I could say they found the error of their ways and like leaving behind everything for the sake of their dreams, not realizing that community and rootedness is actually one of the key ingredients for happiness. And like happiness studies are showing this all the time, that the happiest people are people who are rooted in their communities, even if that means that we're in conflict with each other, if we don't like each other. The fact that like we know each other's names and our histories, and if I'm going to be in the hospital or my children are going to be in the hospital, that like somebody's going to show up with a dish or a ride somewhere, right? And I think they learned that eventually because in their later years, they realized that they had never formed that because they were constantly chasing after their dreams. But it's like, what's the use of dreams if they don't make you happy, right? So in my early years, we did move like every 3 years. And then finally, when I went to college, ironically, they bought this home in Claremont. And it's like the opposite. Like they want to die here. Like they like don't want to ever move ever again. They have a business here. My dad went to graduate school here. So it's like all of that moving made them realize like the beauty and the gift of being committed to a town and a people. And I'm just glad that I got to discover that earlier on, right? It's because of their sacrifice that I figured it out younger.
I love that. It's as you're talking about it and as we're talking about it, it's making me think about how grounding immediate family is. Like because they had each other and they had their children, they never noticed that they didn't build community in that way because they were focused on you and like each other. I think that in a way that type of relationship is stabilizing in and of itself.
Oh, for sure. Yeah, it was all about our family and not really like anything else. I mean, and that's like a very common immigrant mentality, you know? It's like immigrants don't volunteer for their school systems. Immigrants don't like get involved in their communities. It's because they're fighting for the survival of their family. And so they didn't really look out, but just at the four of us and what would be best for the four of us. And it wasn't only until we were settled. And so that's the other thing of the privilege of being a second generation immigrant is that I do consider America my home. I'm a Korean American, whereas my parents consider themselves Koreans who came to America. And so I do volunteer. I do give back to my city. I do participate in all the civic duties, you know, because it's a very different relationship that I have with this land than my parents had.
I think you also, I mean, I really enjoyed reading your book. I saw reflected and sort of written out a lot of the experiences that I have had. And it was nice to sort of, like when you spoke about Taizé worship, I was like, oh my God, I did that in college. And it was a really formative experience of like getting to engage with, you know, I played saxophone in the worship band, but getting to use it in a very different way, in a much more meditative, contemplative practice was like expanded how I engaged with music. And then also like just this idea of rootedness, it was something that when I went to college, I felt like I was, you know, I was a transitory person. I was going to be there for a couple years. And so the degree to which I invested was probably less than I could have. Not that I didn't, it just, there were ways that I could have dove in a little more. So when I landed in Los Angeles, that was top of mind of like knowing that I had missed an opportunity for deep relationship and that I didn't want to replicate that. And that perspective, that posture has made my experience in Los Angeles all the more better. So it was really, it was just very encouraging to sort of hear and read what you had experienced, what you were articulating as a way of finding happiness.
Yeah. I find it also too, like commitment to a people and a community, it's so freeing, you know? Like people say it's so like paralyzing. It's like, you know, being in chains when you're just like in one place, like how boring is that? And I actually find it to be the opposite. It's like, well, like I'm here. I'm staying here. Like I have no choice but to work it out, right? And then also the reminder, like no matter where I go, I'm gonna come up with, like I'm gonna come into conflicts with others. There are going to be things that I don't like. I'm going to get bored. I'm going to want new adventures. So that's always like a sobering reminder too. It's like a new city, a new person, a new community doesn't solve this unrest within me. And that's just like liberating for me. It's like, well, all right, so got no choice, staying.
No, I think one of the things I had to learn at some point, and probably was moving from Michigan to California, and thinking that I was leaving all of the problems that comes along with, I mean, as you guys were talking about how the rootedness of family and how that can be helpful, Juliet. I'm like, sometimes, sometimes, you need that as Southwest says, you got to get away. Like sometimes you do. And I think, this kind of reminds me, there was the chapter, Not All Who Wander Are Lost. You have this, what I would almost call, you describe a kind of necessary wandering, basically, is almost what I would describe it. And there's this quote here that I kind of want to read. You said, in terms of necessary wandering for the process of transformation. And you write, part of why this transformation captivates us as readers or viewers is because it mirrors the kind of journey we all long to take. Unlike other species, humans are implanted with a hunger for the beyond. We're curious about what lies past the boundaries. So we go on adventures and encounter new peoples and ideas to satisfy our perennial hunger. We do it to learn more about the mysteries of the world, including the mysteries of our own selves. And you go on to say, here we encounter a crucial paradox. We leave and explore in order to be more rooted. And I thought that was just really, because that's kind of I don't think Christians do well with paradox, quite honestly. I think that our religion does not hold paradox well. I think Jesus does. I don't know that we actually understand that that's what Jesus is doing. And I wonder if you could just say a little bit more about the kind of root that because you did like have to, in your own, as you describe in your book, you had to kind of go different places to figure out like what you needed to feel grounded, right?
Yes, for
Does that
sure.
resonate, or is that kind of okay?
Yeah. And I want to say, like, stability doesn't exclude adventure, exploration, curiosity, wandering. Like, those stories are so much a part of our Bible, the scriptures. Characters who go off into the unknown, are aliens in a foreign land, are the patriarchs of the Judeo-Christian tradition are all desert wanderers, right? Like Moses, Abraham, Jacob, like searching for their new home. And of course, like Jesus is a wanderer. And I think that those wandering experiences and like figuring out like, what do I believe? Who am I? And testing these things out are so important to committing and stability. And I certainly have had so many wandering experiences that led me to wanting to stay here, right? And right where I am with my community, in my city, with my husband. Not to say that you can't commit without those wandering experiences, but I want to leave a lot of room for all that wandering as well. I really needed it for my own spirituality. Like Wesley was talking about the value of Taizé. It was so different from what I grew up with. It was so like otherworldly. Like I grew up in the evangelical Korean culture, and then we became Methodist, which is also very different, right? Like liturgical, traditional. And then I went to Europe, and it was like a bunch of chanting and silence, and I thought it was so strange. And it changed me, and it made me a better pastor, bringing all of that back into my home in Southern California, into my church.
No, that's so beautiful. And I think it really, to me, I don't know that we actually can have the kind of transformation you're describing without having some of those adventures and leaving. And sometimes those adventures maybe are in your mind, maybe if you're reading, because I'm thinking about like, that was so difficult, for some people who, because of financial reasons, they may not be able to do this.
Of
And so
course.
maybe reading becomes a part of that,
Yes.
of kind of escaping and learning and transforming,
Yeah.
but there has to be some part of you that learns about yourself through experiencing others,
Yeah.
and other
Yeah.
cultures and other, and I think we lose something. And honestly, we're definitely not going to get too much into the politics right now, because we're going to keep this podcast happy and positive. But I can see, in my head, I see some of the challenges that we have as a country with certain communities is they haven't had this transformational aspect of leaving and growing. They may leave, but it's like they leave and judge rather than leave and like are open for transformation. And so those are just kind of some of my thoughts. But I know, Blair, you said, I know you had a question you want to ask that are kind of about the spiritual practice piece.
Yeah, as you described the book to us at the beginning here, you talked about the idea of Ignatian spirituality being really key to how you formed the book, and then also how you've come to this place of sort of inner stability, regardless of your circumstances.
Yeah.
So could you give us like a little primer on Ignatian spirituality? We know our listeners come from all sorts of different kinds of Christian backgrounds and also non-Christian backgrounds. So
yeah.
I'd love for you to just like give the intro. What is Ignatian spirituality? And then how has that impacted and created this sense of stability for you?
Sure. So I do talk about Ignatian spirituality as well. I love Saint Ignatius, who is a Spanish priest who founded the Ignatian order. But the book is mostly the tree that grew out of Benedictine spirituality. And I discovered it because I was working as a secretary at an Episcopal seminary right after I graduated from seminary, and I met a student who was on track to become an Episcopal priest. And she was like one of my favorite people, introverted like me, very thoughtful, very spiritual. We always talked about like different monasteries that we were visiting because we just like loved doing that kind of thing. And she shared with me that she was not going to continue her ordination process as an Episcopal priest. And I was like, why, like what happened? And she's like, oh, because her church didn't approve her to the next step. And so a lot of churches, including our own, it's a step-by-step. You have to like go rung by rung, where like the first rung is you have to be affirmed by your local congregation in order to get to the next step to progress in your ordination journey. And the first rung, she was rejected or denied. They didn't see the calling in her. They didn't affirm that calling. And I was so shocked because, again, she was like one of my favorite people, favorite students. And so the first words out of my mouth are obviously like the words of my parents and the words that I grew up with. It's like, that's an easy solution. Just leave. Just go to a different church. Start over again. Right? Because like clearly you are called to be a priest. These people don't recognize that. And so you just need to start elsewhere. And she shared with me that she was a lay person practicing Benedictine spirituality. And one of the 3 vows that Benedictines take before they become a monk is the vow of stability. And so in the Benedictine order, they're very unique from all the other monastic orders, is that when you become a monk, you can still like be a monk in a different community all over the world. But the Benedictines are the only monks where after they take their orders, they commit to that community for life, that specific city, that specific community. In fact, there are gravesites at each of the Benedictine monastery because the idea is that you just die with your people there. And she said that she practiced this as a layperson. And so she was going to stay and stick it out with her church because of how committed she was to this idea. And I was like so utterly shocked and breathtaken by this. And at the same time, I was like, oh, there's something here for me. I've never heard of anything like this, like committing to a people that reject you, that don't see you for how you see yourself. And there's something here. There's a wisdom here that I need to explore more of. And so that's just like a little bit. And since then, I've had the pleasure of visiting several Benedictine monasteries. My favorite one is right here in San Diego. I take retreats there. I got to interview some of the monks there about their journey. So it's just, I feel like there's so much wisdom in our age of constant transience and Instagram and social media where, we all have friends who are just always leaving behind things. And it looks so sparkly and glitzy, like their new chapter of life. And so we might be tempted to do the same thing. Half of my friends have divorced their spouses, and they show pictures of new relationships. And I'm like, oh, well, maybe I should leave this one behind, I just feel like this is like so countercultural for our age right now.
That's literally why I worry about my wife's on Instagram. I was like, you just need to get off all that stuff, man. Don't be looking
That's
at
what
other
everybody
stuff.
I quit it. I was like, this is better for my spirituality, for my soul to not do that right now.
Lydia, one thing that came up for me as I was reading the book, and because I kept, as Wesley said, like I saw parts of me. Actually, I'm not surprised, Wesley, that you read it, and particularly because of the immigrant background, and I suspect your own parents' background probably had some. I could see how that would connect with your own experience as having immigrant parents, right? But I kept wondering to what extent some of the desire for change or the rootedness, perhaps, or this idea could be what role gender plays in shaping the way, perhaps, women, but especially within Christianity, can be taught to nest like that this is supposed to be this good thing, and if you don't have that, like kind of what's wrong with you, and maybe what's in, and I don't know. I was just curious as to how you think your own identity, as a cisgender woman, informed or shaped perhaps some of what brought you to write this book, or feel like this book needed to be written.
Yeah. Well, I will say that, like, okay, so in terms of archetypes, right? Like the feminine energy is more the nurturer, the nest, right? We nourish, we nurture. And the masculine energy is like very like adventure energy, like risk taking. And everybody has those masculine and energies within ourselves, which is why two moms can raise great children, two dads can raise great children, a single mom can raise great children, a single dad can, like we all have that masculine feminine energy within ourselves. Sometimes more or less according to what season of life we're in. I will say that for me and my husband, we display the opposite stereotypical energies. So my husband is very like home driven, place driven. He is very much like committed to his community and his job. Like he will stay at a job probably for like the rest of his life, even if they don't treat him well. Now that's not a good thing either, right? Like, but I'm the opposite. Like I'm always thinking about where we can go next. I'm always dreaming about our next vacation, the next home we want to get. Like just up an adventure. Like I am the one that's up for adventures and risks. So I think that we need both though, right? Like whether in a partnership or within ourselves, and to temper ourselves too. And also when we get overly stagnant, right? Not just ourselves, but our institutions get overly stagnant, to be open to change and growth. In our institution, I feel like it's very feminine, right? We're very like, okay, let's save the institution. Let's stay where we are. Where Methodist churches are very resistant to change. Most mainline denominations are very resistant to change. So what can it mean for us to be more adventure driven, risk taking, pushing in all the cards to see what happens, even if it means we blow up? I don't know. Like every church is having this kind of conversation that looks different. For us, I think in our world right now, we need people who stay. Among millennials and younger, the world needs people who stay. Our earth is hurting because our people are leaving, right? And they don't care about their land. And so when we stay, all of a sudden, we have stake in our land, in our communities, because our children are hurting, right? So instead of just like uprooting ourselves and be like, well, like, I don't have to care about the pollution in that neighborhood because I'm going to a better one, right? Like, no, we're like, our world needs people who stay and are committed and are going to transform the land and transform the communities. We need people who stay in their schools and don't take their kids out because the schools aren't good enough, right? So like, that's what we need more of. I mean, I think like several generations ago, we needed people who left. So it's that, and that's like wisdom.
100%.
It's like the wisdom to know at every moment, right? I think like one of the definitions of wisdom is not having an answer, but being fluid for every time and place. And the wisdom now is different from the wisdom then, is that now we need people who stay.
Thanks so much for these reflections, Lydia, and even for correcting me when I got the wrong spirituality. And it's so funny to me that I went to Ignatian spirituality, because Ignatian spirituality, as I reflected listening to you talk about Benedictine spirituality, is almost the polar opposite. Because Ignatius was a missionary, whereas Benedict was stable in a single place. And so Ignatian spirituality very much is about coming home to yourself when you are not able to be at home in a single place, because it's a missionary spirituality. Whereas this Benedictine spirituality that you've discovered is about making community, finding home wherever it is that you are. And I'm absolutely in this. I've always been I study missiology. I've always been like a missionary spirit. And so Ignatian spirituality has kept me so healthy for so long, or like been the thing that holds me. And I'm actually in a season now where Los Angeles is home for my husband and I, but we'd been away and we've come back because of my husband's job, not by my choice. I've been dragged along a little bit back to LA, and it's not been an easy transition, but we are both committed now to saying LA has been our home. LA means so much to us, and it is a really hard city to live in right now. It's always been a hard city to live in, but it's an especially hard city to live in right now with the socioeconomic and political realities and climate change reality. Like, all of these things are making it very hard to be in LA. And I think I really need some Benedictine spirituality of what does it look like to love this city that's loved me, and to commit to being here as a family and building community. So just thanks for writing this book, and for reintroducing me, to, again, that we need different kinds of spiritualities for different seasons of our lives.
I'm wondering, Wesley, go ahead. I know you had a question. I have one.
Oh, yeah. This is going to be about politics because that's what my life is around right now.
Yeah, that's important too.
One of the things that I've found, as I've sort of stayed longer and longer in Los Angeles, is how often, or one of the things that I've seen a lot is how often people, so there's this whole mayoral election happening in New York, as maybe most of us are aware of. One of the campaign things that the Democratic Socialist candidate Zohar Mamdani has been doing is like PSAs to New Yorkers about, like, you live here, but you're still registered in another place. Bring your registration here so that you can vote in the things that like directly impact your immediate life, your day to day. And I've experienced that in my organizing work, in my advocacy work, where people still feel like, well, maybe my vote counts more in this other place, or maybe like I still have some sort of connection to this other place, but you're living here and now, and the things that you're not engaging with are directly affecting you. And so like there's this, it's not just in our spiritualities, but like in all the places that we inhabit, there's something still that feels a little like unwilling to just dive in. And that's and so it's like I'm hearing you talk about sort of the importance of being rooted, but also like investing and engaging, and so just bring up this idea of like your local politics, your local communities directly affect you even more than you think, and it's important to sort of like acknowledge that and begin to be the hands and feet that are helping fix the things in your own community. In the same way that, like, I think in the institutions we inhabit, in the Methodist Church, in whatever places we inhabit, they're not always great, but it's our efforts that help move along these places to to exist in a better way. To I don't know if high itinerancy is how big of a deal that is within Methodism, but it always struck me as odd, because you form a connection with your pastor and then they get moved. And it's like you have to restart, and not saying that restarting isn't a good thing or can't lead to good benefits, but it's like you're invested and then it's ripped away. And so, yeah, I don't know. It's just a reflection as sort of as to what you guys are talking about.
Yeah. And I actually, I was thinking about what Chris said about the masculine tendency to be more outward focused. And it kind of ties to what you're saying, Wesley, is like, I have 3 kids now. And I have a full-time job, and I'm trying to write. And the only thing I can do right now is like focus on my little tiny community. And for me, I've had to like really believe that that is enough for God and for my spirituality, that like focusing on my little tiny corner of the world is holy and just as holy as my greater country and world. And Chris, I think this does, and this is where I am very feminine actually in my season of life right now, is that I see my male colleagues and they are like all about the most impact in our world. Like, what can we do? They're very outward focused, the most influence in our world, like the most transformation. And they're out there with these protests and, like working with our leaders. And I feel insufficient, looking at these people with so much energy and ambition to change our world. And I can't do it right now, right? I can't. If I did, I would lose my health. And I don't think God wants me to do that. And so I think this is where like the hierarchy of the masculine way of being is coming out in me. And I'm having to like really confront that, is that it's not better. Bigger is not better than smaller.
And, I mean, I got 1 kid, and I'm perpetually exhausted. So I'm like 3 kids just sounds like a crazy town. And, I'll just be honest with you.
It is
So
crazy town. It is.
I'm having a vat of coffee day. Like with 2 kids, I'm like, it takes me 90 minutes to do a morning drop off now because it's summertime, and so camp is further away. Anyway, yes, I don't know how any of it like.
Come to hate summer. It's like,
summer's so much harder.
Yeah, right. It's like, why aren't you little rascals in school? Like, get away from me.
In the place where it's familiar and I know everyone, and it's like, easy to just, I don't have to like every new week there's new coaches, and like I have to redo your EpiPen form like every single week.
I know. It's like, you need to be away from me for 8 hours a day for me to feel normal, right? Like, summer's the worst now, can I just say, as a mom. I used to love summer.
You absolutely can.
Yes, I used to love summer.
Wesley's the one who makes the faces like whenever like the kids do anything, like, Wesley's a great uncle. Wesley's a great uncle, but like if it's a surprise, like if something's surprise noise or a surprise, he's just like, oh, like
1 sounds like a lot. So 3 is
summer is
insurmountable.
It's all of the instability of parenting in like a microcosm, and it gets magnified. And those who have community around them can get through the summer much easier than those of us who are existing without stable extra aunties and uncles close by, without literal grandparents, right? Like when you don't have people to help do pick up and drop off, like summer is when being a parent who has been on the move is very hard. And
and I can only focus on this little community that I have. I mean, we try. We went to the No Kings protest in Claremont because I want to be a good citizen. I want to show my kids about protests, the importance of protesting. Within 5 minutes of being there, my baby had a big poop blowout.
Yep, that's what they do. Right? He's like holding it right till you get to the protest.
Right, her entire carrier got covered in poop. And I wanted to like be there next to my friends and my colleagues who were there for like all day. No, I had to leave after 5 minutes. And I have to look at myself and be like, this is holy too. This like caretaking is holy too. You know,
I don't
Yeah.
remember exactly who it was in the feminist movement of the 70s, but it became a phrase of like, everyone has a place in the resistance, like whether it's in the creche or in Congress, like we all have a role to play.
Yeah.
And for women to be engaged, somebody has to take care of those domestic things. And so I think I agree. It's not the big impact is better, because we talk a lot on this podcast of people are figuring out what they believe, but they can't figure out how to talk to their family members and their friends and their neighbors about the change in their beliefs that are pushing them more and more towards humanizing, fighting for human rights, engaging a loving, inclusive message. And so sometimes the micro is actually harder.
It is.
Yeah. Actually, I want to, you have a section in here that where you write about parenting, and you tell a little story about you and your oldest son that I think really captures the essence of what we're trying to get at here. And it's that chapter, it's the little things. And you talk about being bored as a parent, which I could totally resonate with. And you have this, you actually quoting another book where he says, we have to fight for our ability to pay attention. It is not given. It does not assert itself as a need until it's far too late. And that's from Catherine May in Enchantment, Awakening Wonder in an Anxious Age. And I think you talk about just it's the little things and being present and noticing like the beauty of like presence, actually, and how hard it can be to be present in our modern age, whether because of social media and the desire to compare yourself, or whether it can be because our kids sometimes want to do the boring things. I take medicine, like I take medicine because of my neural complexity to help me be more present, because otherwise it would just be terrible. And it has made me a better parent. It has made me, Isaiah noticed, like literally the first day he thought something was wrong with me because we were outside coloring on a grate, because it had sidewalk chalk. And I sat there and did it for like a half hour, and he kept looking like he was like he was like expecting me just to get up and leave. And I finally had some, through the gift of pharmaceuticals, I was able to just sit there and play with my kid. And so there's this way in which, like, in taking care of that, the family, that space, in that small community has profound value. It's different value than being out in the streets. It's different value, but it's no less valuable. And that is so, it's hard because I do think it kind of goes back, and you talk about this in the beginning of the book, the way in which we want to compare ourselves to others, right? And I'm fortunate that for whatever reason, the only times I had a teensy bit of that was in grad school, because I feel like grad school just does that to everybody. It makes you feel like you're competitive. But I've just been, happy with, and maybe as I'm even thinking this question out, and it's not even a question, it's just a comment about myself, and then I know I'll turn over to someone else to share. I did not expect I would do this with my life. I did not expect I would get a bachelor's degree. I did not expect I would go to grad school. I didn't expect I would have the financial security I have. Like, my expectations for myself were to have a job, get married, maybe have some children, and probably stay in Michigan with everybody else and not do much. And so I've far surpassed my expectations. And because of that, I think I can have a sense of gratefulness that's pretty normative, just because my wife is more like you, Lydia, whereas I think that she always is talking about doing something, going somewhere, and being something. And I'm much more like your husband. I'm just kind of like, I can do that, and I'll go because that's where you want to go. But, I'm good. Like, I like,
I'm good.
I'm like,
I like where I'm at. Yeah.
I'm like, other than like maybe need to escape because of like the political circumstances, which is a whole different thing. And, maybe that's a different podcast. I'm pretty settled, but I do think in part it's because we have tried to be intentional about not, at least I would say I have tried to be intentional about prioritizing as best as I can the home as a center of importance and not just turning to the world. And I mean, that's what this podcast is for. It's a way for us to do some world stuff. And I mean, I'm doing the podcast from home, so maybe that's it. Maybe you need to combine the best of both worlds.
Yeah. And I feel like you do, Chris. I feel like you do. And the thought that came to me when you said like you have far surpassed what you expected for your life. I mean, it's just the beginning for you. And I know, I think you know that. But I love what you're saying. And this goes back to what Blair was saying about Ignatian spirituality, is that one of his practices that he gives to his community is the daily examine, which my husband and I practice together every week. And so the daily examine, the way Ignatius taught it, is to notice God's movement in your life by reflecting on your day from beginning to end. You can do it once at the end of each day or like 3 times, breakfast, lunch, and dinner, whatever. We do it every week. So we like look back on the week, and practicing this spiritual practice regularly, it strengthens our vision for noticing God's presence in our lives, because otherwise we just go, and we miss it. We miss the movement of God in our life when it's everywhere all the time. And I have led this practice for, the decade that I've been in ministry. And the themes that I hear when I ever lead a group through the daily examine is that when they share moments of God in their life, it's always so simple and mundane. Like a very important politician can be going through this daily examine, and the moment that sparked the most joy for him was like sitting at his coffee table and drinking a cup of coffee and watching the hummingbird outside his window. Right? And so for me, like, this was my lifesaver when my first child was a toddler, because there's nothing more boring than having a toddler because their interests are so vapid. It is.
You don't like Duplos?
I don't like Duplos. Like, let's have like rich conversations about our feelings, Hugh. Like, I don't want to be like on my knees, like rolling toy cars on the carpet, right? Like, this is so vapid to me. But it's like when I would do these spiritual practices, like that's where God was, not in these like big, sparkly, glamorous moments. It was like in these like really mundane moments. And that has like changed me so much, like noticing that God is in the boring moments of our lives. And that's also helping me not to like go elsewhere, because every time I go elsewhere, I rob myself of this connection I get to make with God.
That's deep. I mean, that is like, there's so much you write that I'm like, there are people in my life that I want to read your book, but actually absorb it, because it's different than reading it and just reading it, and then reading it and absorbing it and applying it. But I have learned as an educator, you can teach people intellectually, but that transformation is internal, and they have to do it themselves. But that's so wise. Like, it is so wise. But Julia, I know I want to toss it to you to ask a question.
So I have been quiet because I am in a very different place in my life than my colleagues and friends. I agree very deeply with your belief that, like, in your home and with your children and in your partnership, that is like the holiest place. And when I moved to LA 15 years ago, I like poured myself into community. Like, I joined a church. That's why I came here. I came from doing theater. So I was very transient for all of my 20s, for the majority of my 20s. And I moved to LA in my mid to late 20s with the intention of like putting in roots. And that just hasn't been a reality for me. And I am at an age where I'm grappling with the fact that very well may never be a reality for me. And that there's not, like, I don't really have power in that way in that situation.
Yeah.
And so I've been wanting to leave because I feel as though like my intention to put down deep roots and like the work that I've done to do that. And like, I'm not saying that I'm not well loved and I don't have community, and I'm really grateful for that. But like, a community generally is a group of families.
Yeah.
And like Wesley, I know like Wesley's my good Judy, and like we kiki, and like, but we have like different, he doesn't want the same things. We have just different wants and different needs.
Yes.
And everyone does.
Yeah.
And I think for me, like the idea of staying in a place where I've not been able to get my needs met. And like for me, I really have been considering the idea of belonging to myself, and like God is my like one consistent, like my one constant, like that reality of like I'm like I might not have that in like relationships outside of myself, and learning to grapple with that. Also then staying in a place where like I don't necessarily feel safe politically, like all of those things is just your book deeply resonated because I understand, because like you have the things that I desire, and like I just don't have them. And like I think about Chris Carter, and I'm sure if you asked him, like, do you think you would have any of the things that you have, like all of the things that you listed, if you didn't partner with Gabby, or like, right, like
No. I
and
would
so
be, yeah. No. My
right.
wife is the substance of other than God, is pretty much that. Like, other than God.
And so for me, it's just like the desire to stay where I am, but also recognizing that I might not ever have my needs met, and that just like those are the options, and that is incredibly painful. And now the whole world, or at least a few thousand people, are going to know about that. But I wanted to say something.
And it's going to be a great thing, because everyone has needs, and we should try to get them met. And I don't think that that's a bad thing at all. I feel like that's a really good thing to like articulate, like, this is a deep need of mine and I want it to be met in this beautiful life that I've been given. And I truly believe that when we have needs, it's a need that's meant to be met somewhere, somehow. And a big part of my story, Julia, is leaving. I left San Diego. I lived a mile from the beach, like in one of the most beautiful areas in the world, and at a great church, and I didn't want to be there. And so I do talk about in my book, like the permission to leave and giving ourselves permission to leave, and the right leaving versus like the leaving where we're going to start another chapter following the same cycle. And so I talk about different kinds of leaving, and one is the leaving to escape, right? Like not dealing with whatever challenge we had before, leaving a bunch of loose ends and mess to clean up. And that's not the kind of leaving we want for ourselves, because it's like we open the door and it's like all that same rubbish has followed us, right? As opposed to like the leaving where we tie up all those loose ends and then we feel this peace, and then leaving to that next place comes like a feeling of coming home, right? Like the leaving that feels like we're coming home, that's the kind of leaving that we're aiming for. So not all leaving is discouraged, right? Like actually a lot of leaving is very good. I'm sure, Chris, when you left Michigan and you came to California, like it was like totally new and foreign territory, and you're like, oh, I've come home. Like I've come home, right?
I mean, I think that's such a great way to put it, because I fairly immediately, I would say, felt a sense of groundedness and home in Southern California. But it was, I mean, you know, oh, two or maybe 3 weeks before we moved out here. And so for those of you, I mean, most of you, there's no reason for me to ever, I've never mentioned this on a podcast, but I'm in an interracial marriage. And in Michigan, this is still a big deal for me as a Black man married to a white woman. And we had a flat tire on the side of the road, and I was changing the tire, and somebody threw a a cup of probably pop or something like that out the window and hit the car. And I mean, if it hit me, it would have done like serious damage. And that was one of just several encounters that we had. And it was exhausting. I was just like, I'm tired of arguing with people about us. And I remember being in Los Angeles in seminary and feeling like Gabby and I were the least strange couple that I could see in eye shot. I was like, there's all kinds of stuff out here, man. And I'm like, we look super norm. We're
You're like, I'm
boring.
home.
Yeah.
I'm
And
home.
I was like, I'm in a place where we could just be us. And that was really, that's what we needed. That's what we needed to actually begin to transform. Both of us.
Yeah.
And it's not our fault that we were born in a place that was, that kind of trafficked in that kind of racism. But, we miss parts of Michigan, but, California is our home, and it wasn't necessary leaving. And similarly, I would say, Julia, persuading me to take the job in Los Angeles wasn't necessary leaving. And, there's these things that aren't always easy, but as you said, you discernment can help you understand that they're right. And you don't want to leave them. I love how you said, don't leave the loose ends and leave the mess behind. Cause that to me is how you discern whether or not it's a necessary or just like a escapism.
Right.
And that's so beautiful. So,
and it's harder the older you get. Like when I was 23 and I'm leaving Wisconsin, which is not a place I ever had any business being. I don't like why I was born there. We'll never know. It's one of the mysteries of the universe. But like, I couldn't get out of there fast enough. And it was absolutely the right thing for similar reasons to Chris. Like, just like, it's not my vibe, but after being, I consider California and LA to be my home. It's feels more like a home than where I grew up. I've been here almost as long as I was in Wisconsin at this point, right?
Yeah.
But the idea of leaving is a bigger deal. Like that's a big deal. I'm a woman of a particular age now. I can't just be,
How old are you? I'm just kidding.
Oh no, yeah. Oh man, I was about to say,
she's
I'm
21.
Like,
You'd never
exactly.
I'm 11.
She's Julia has reached the age where she is ageless. She is timeless.
That's right. I'm all of the ages.
She's eternal.
You have we talked about like the Black and Asian gift of like where
the good genes.
Like we look decades younger than we actually are. At least
You'll never know.
For Asian women, it's like once we hit 80, it's like we look 1,000. It's like we look like 40.
Yeah, but that's 80 years of looking incredible. I mean,
it's more than most can say.
Yeah.
I mean, we got to get some benefits from all that racism.
I know.
Man. We got to get some benefits from all that racism, man. I don't know.
We look, we look
exactly.
Young.
Well, there's one more question I want to ask before we close, because now I feel like this is what happens when we're in the good stuff of the podcast right now. So that's always it's hard for me to wrap it up when we get to this part.
Yeah.
I'm curious if there's anything, having now finished the book, that you would add to it or make any kind of tweaks or changes, to what you wrote, or anything you feel like, oh man, if I were to go back, I would maybe say this or do this or add this differently. Is there anything you would you would do with that?
This is such a good question. So it's just really hard for a writer, right? Because like for us to say, like,
yes, I do know.
Yes, but it's such a good question. So, the second part of the book is so much better than the first part of my book, and it's because this is my very first book. I've always been an essayist. I've written tons of essays. This is my first full-length book. And it was by the second half of the book that I finally found my voice. Even though I've been writing for years, it's just like the process of writing a book transforms people. And so if I could do it all over again, I would start at the second half of the book and bring that voice to the first part of the book. But it was too late at that point. Like the manuscript was due. So, and this is the gift of, we get to keep writing and carry that voice into what I hope will be future books.
I mean, you make a shift between telling a story versus telling your story.
Yeah.
And I could sense it. But
Yeah.
again, it's also weird reading a book where I know a chunk of what, like you're telling stories and I'm like,
Yeah.
I was around, when this part
Uh-huh.
happened.
Yeah.
And so
Yeah. You're like,
that's,
I
and
went
it,
to her San Diego church. Yeah.
yeah, like exactly. So her San Diego church was a mile from my house, right? So I mean,
Yeah.
it's different, but there is this confidence. Is probably a better way to say it, rather than
Yeah.
it's like there's a more assertiveness and confidence in your writing.
Oh, it was
And
like
I
my
mean,
hair was on fire the second half of the book. Yeah, it was so
yeah,
different.
yeah, and that's first of all, that's such a great self awareness to know that about yourself as a writer and to be able to read it and be able to be that self reflective. But second, it's a great book. The entire book is
Thank
good.
you.
The shift in tone is more about you. It's your own personal shift in a journey, and to an extent, it really is reflective of like what you're describing in the book in terms of a process of transformation, a process of becoming, and how that gives us a sense of rootedness in our identities and who we are.
Yeah.
But the first half is still good.
Oh yeah,
Thank
no,
you.
it's
It's
I would
not
say
like
Thank
yeah.
you.
it's just transformed. Like it transforms, and that actually even is a testament to the alchemy you talk about. Of like,
Yeah.
you even see the alchemy play out in the formation of the book. That it becomes something as you go along that's different than where you started. And I think that's actually perhaps not an accident, but a holy transformation, right?
Yeah.
Well, Lydia, I want to thank you so much for joining us. I want to say, I already know I want to have you back on the podcast to talk about parenting because there's so
Oh,
many
thank
things,
you.
so many stories you have in this book. I was like, oh my gosh, we need to have an episode about parenting because trying to figure that stuff out is
I would
like,
love that. Yeah.
yeah, it is wild. But I'm so grateful to have you on, excited about your book, and really hope people go out and pick it up. We'll have information on that in the show notes, so everybody knows where to get it. And yeah, thank you so much for joining us, Lydia. And we are looking forward to having you back on sometime.
It was so fun. Thank you guys.
All right, thanks for joining us for the Progressive Christians Podcast. The Progressive Christians Podcast is the ministry of The Loft, a worship community of Westwood United Methodist Church. If you would like to connect with us and be a part of the conversation, you can find us on all social media platforms at The Progressive Christians. Our show is mixed and edited by our wonderful audio engineer, AJ. And again, we want to invite you to submit any listener questions that you would love us to answer on our email address, which is listed in the show notes as well. And rate, review, share, and all that good stuff to the podcast. And we will see y'all next time. Bye.
Bye.
Bye.